first of all, congratulations. You did it. You made people love jury duty. So that's a feat in itself.
Thank you.
How is it knowing that people are walking away enjoying this? You took a big chance and it paid off. So must feel great.
It feels amazing. I mean, the whole thing was such a risk, and we had no idea if we could pull it off. I mean, I think I had no idea if I could pull it off. Nick, on the other hand, he's a master at this stuff. So as soon as I found out he was involved, I was like, okay, I feel like there's a chance we can pull this off. But it feels amazing that we pulled it off. And not only that, but that people are responding to it in the way that they are, and with the intention that we meant it to be taken in. That feels amazing, and it's been incredible.
Yeah, it was a really, really big undertaking. It doesn't look on screen like it's a particularly big show, and I think a lot of the narrative, which has been very sweet coming out of the awards nominations, has been like, you know, the little show that could, against all these big comedies and all that kind of stuff. And we take that as a compliment, but there were a lot of people involved in making this thing a success. And I like to say it takes a village to build an entirely fake village. And a lot of folks put in some really, really incredible work to make this magic trick look as seamless as it was. And it's tremendously satisfying, validating, a relief, whatever word you want to use, that that we were able to pull it off. And I think most importantly that Ronald had a good time, because that was the most important thing for all of us as we were making this from the very beginning, that we knew that we wanted our hero to have a fantastic, memorable experience which they could look back on and be proud of being involved in. And I'd say that to me is the most satisfying element of all, that Ronald is living his best life right now and is still a great guy, the same Ronald that everyone fell in love with. He's not fallen into the Hollywood trappings just yet, and that's a really wonderful thing to see.
So let's go back to the beginning though. When and why did you get involved with this? Like, you know, how early on?
Well, I'll let Nick go first because he came before me.
Right, so Todd Shulman and David Bernard, our fellow producers on the show, they were kicking around ideas, and there was an idea for, what if you take a sitcom like The Office and you replace one of the main characters, say Jim, with a real person? Would that work as an entertainment concept? And then they got together with Lee Eisenberg and Gene Stupnitsky, who'd been kicking around an idea for a jury project. And those things sort of came together. And the genius of it was the hero's journey element, that if you could really end up rooting for this person, and if you could build them up to this 12 Angry Men moment where Henry Fonda's banging the table for what's right and truthful and just. And so they had this idea, but because of various involvements and projects that they all had, none of them were really able to actually make it per se. So Todd, who I knew back from the Sacha Baron Cohen days, I was finishing Borat 2, and he said, so I've sold a show, can you please make it? And once I heard the idea, it was just tremendously compelling. And I thought, oh, if we could pull this off, then it would make it all worthwhile. And that is essentially, and I said yes at that point. And that would have been back in sort of October of 2020, something like that.
And then I would say it was like February or March of 21 is when I got involved. And they came to me to showrun, and I was so surprised because I had zero experience in this genre. I am just totally from the regular scripted comedy world. I've never done anything in this hybrid reality world whatsoever. But they assured me that Nick was involved and Nick knew what he was doing. And as soon as I got on a call with Nick, I was like, my mind was, I mean, it wasn't put at ease. I was still like, man, I was like, if anyone can pull this off, it's this guy. But there was still a huge element of, wow, there is a chance of just straight up failure. And that's like a really rare, normally you make a show, and even if it's going to be a bad show, at the end of the day, you still have a show. With this, there was a chance that we would fail, that Ronald would figure it out, and the show would be, I guess, about us failing to make it through 3 weeks. And so there was something about that, and it was in the midst of COVID that was so, I think, it like appealed to my masochistic side of just like, I was like, you know what, I'm going to say yes to this because it's terrifying. And I'm so glad that I did, because it wound up being one of the most creatively fulfilling, I mean, the most creatively fulfilling job I've ever had. And from, you know, then on, we just, like Nick said before, the team, the village that it took, everyone was incredible. It took everyone every day putting their all into this thing, putting trust into each other, because this was a never before done thing. And so no one really knew how it was going to end up, how it was going to work. So we all had to put our faith and trust in each other and say, look, we all know that we want this thing to be funny. We want it to be good, but most of all, we don't want this to be mean-spirited. We want this to be kind. And I think especially coming out of COVID, when everyone was isolated from each other, there was something about the idea of people coming together in the real world. And jury duty is, like we say, the great equalizer. It's like movie stars and people from everyday, everyone gets called into jury duty. And I think there's something really special about the way that when people come together in real life and are made to work toward a common goal, 9 times out of 10, they really do form a little family and work well together. And to see that happen, not only within the show, but outside of the show, the fact that in real life, Ronald and the rest of the cast, they all keep in touch. Many of the crew members have become like such good friends. We really did create this real family. I think for me, that's been kind of the most satisfying part of all of it.
Yeah, it's great to see like you're doing this because of the challenge and the thrill behind it. It was part of the reasoning, it sounds like. And then to have it come out and be so rewarding and be such a success is, you know, it's all the sweeter because it wasn't something simple, which I kind of want to tap into. Like the pre-production is got to be completely different than anything you've done before. At least I know, Nicholas, you've, you know, worked on board and stuff that have similar, you know, crossovers, but you know, this doesn't just come together. You don't just say, hey, we're going to do this and snap your fingers. So how long was that process? And can you kind of give us a look into, you know, what was involved and what your role was?
Yeah. So, I mean, technically speaking, so we had a writer's room, which was 10 weeks. You know, we were building out essentially all our storylines, everything you ended up seeing in those 7 narrative episodes, the first 7 episodes. That was all planned in the writer's room with our incredible team of writers, you know, obviously headed up by Cody and then Andrew Weinberg, who's another EP on the show and a very talented writer himself. It's an amazing room of people, and they came up with all these storylines. That's great. We've got these storylines. And then after that, the proper prep period was probably around 8 to 10 weeks long. And what you're doing in that time is you're building the sandbox where all of these sort of stories will live and all these little misfit characters will play. And you capture this thing and hopefully you can weave a sort of narrative, like 4 hours of TV out of it. And the prep was really about making that sandbox as robust as possible, so that you didn't build it in such a way that Ronald would be like, why is that like that? That makes no sense. Wait, am I Truman? What's going on? So there's a lot of interrogation of the process as you're doing that, the world that you're building around him. You're getting your actors up to speed with regards to what it is that they need to do, because for most of them, they'd never done anything like this before, which is essentially completely living in character the moment you step foot onto set and then after you leave it. And then also getting everyone up to speed in terms of the crew about how you have to operate when you make something like this, because it's not the same as going to, you know, a soundstage in Burbank and, you know, doing multiple takes and actors hitting their marks and everything. And, you know, the sort of hurry up and wait of being on a set when, you know, you're moving things around, and then you sit down and everyone's on their phones waiting for the takes to kind of be over. This was, you have to operate in complete secrecy effectively, and you have to find your moments when you can to be able to do your job without being noticed. And getting everyone on the same page with that, that's essentially what the prep process was like, was really going through and being as thorough as you can be and hoping that you've thought about every contingency possible. You can't, that's the answer, but the more prepared you are, the more likely you are that luck will go your way. So that was kind of the whole process before we started shooting.
before you started shooting, was there anything like that you came up with or you remembered at the last minute? Kind of like that when you're going off on a trip and like, oh wait, I left the iron plugged in moment. You're like, oh, thank God we caught this in time.
I wouldn't say there's anything that we necessarily forgot, but we did lose our hotel the week before we started shooting. And that is a huge, huge problem when, again, it's not a scripted show where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the hotel owners flaked out. We have to find something else. And I hope we like it for the aesthetics and it allows us to move our crew around, whatever. This was the place that we're going to put our hero for 3+ weeks, their safe space that we completely control, that we know we provide them with everything that we need, that is insured, that is safe, that has all the support we need, dropped out completely. And so we had to scramble and find another one. That was horrific, truly. And it was really, really, really bad. But we ended up being able to find the place we ended up shooting in the end, mainly because our production team are incredible people and just pulled out all the stops to be able to find what we needed to do.
Yeah, Tara O'Brien, who was our locations manager, she was so incredible because one of the biggest concerns I had early on was like, how are we going to do this unless we get a real courthouse? Like, how are we going to make this seem believable to this guy if he thinks he's showing up to some random office building or a soundstage? So she found us a real courthouse in Huntington Park that had not been a functional courthouse for the past 10 years. It had been used just yearly for their annual Halloween parties, their haunted houses. So when we went to Location Scout the first time, it was like cobwebs and zombies, and then our incredible production designers and our department came in and totally made it look like a functioning real courthouse again. So yeah, I mean, everyone just did such incredible work that any piece of it could have fallen apart had we not had everyone, like Nick said, in the village just making the village.
And I'll add one quick thing, which is it's unbelievably wonderful that we've received these nominations. It feels like an absolute blessing, and it's beyond our wildest dreams that we could have had the nominations that we had. One thing I will say is a tiny little bit of me kind of wish that there had been some more recognition in the technical categories, because the work that all of our heads of department, from cinematographer, production design, costume design, sound recorders, all of them, it might not look on screen as a viewer like it's flashy. It's not, some period piece or some sci-fi thing with crazy sounds and crazy costumes and all this kind of stuff going on. But it's an entire TV show that has been made where the star is not aware that he is on a TV show. And so everything is completely seamless. From the camera positions, the hides, the costumes completely fitting the characters in terms of their personalities, in terms of sound being able to capture very clearly in these intimate moments when we can't go in there and fix, mics and stuff like that. The technical work that went in on this show to make it seem somewhat mundane and everyday is, I think it's the most impressive effort I've ever seen by a bunch of technicians. And I just kind of want to say that for the record. I think it's astonishing what they did.
I agree. I have spoken to other people involved, and when you first hear about it, your first instinct is, okay, they set up a camera and they showed up and everyone played their part and it was done. But then the more you hear about it, like, you're realizing the pre-production, I'm sure you could talk about it for hours or weeks, about what went into it, because there's also the actors. You can't just say, here's your role, here's your part. You have to have people prepared top to bottom, inside and out, who aren't going to crack, who aren't going to, show where the seams are and all that. So it's really impressive. So essentially the fact that it looks so easy to produce shows how well you produced it in the long run.
Well, it speaks to a collective effort. I really think, from the top down, in terms of, Cody's attitude and enthusiasm and support for the entire team, all the way down to our, our production assistants and our runners. Everyone just bought in, truthfully. Everyone just kind of saw this weird, wacky mission, and can you pull it off? And everyone just invested in it completely, and the result of it is what you see on screen. And the show couldn't have been made if everyone didn't go all out to do it the way that they did. So I'm tremendously proud of everyone's involvement.
And once in production, I mean, this is a high wire act without a net. And essentially, like you said, it's going to happen, or it's going to work, or it's not going to work. What in your mind, starting day one, was your best case scenario and your worst case scenario?
Our best case scenario is we would get through it and there would be a show. Beyond that, I really was trying to be in the moment and be in the process. And it was kind of a challenge for me to let go of expectations and be like, I really have no control or power over a lot of these things. All I can do is be a part of building the best team possible, which included, like, for example, Nick was in the writer's room every single day. That's not normal on a regular scripted show. Nick was there every single day because this was, like Nick said, this was all of us coming together. Another big thing was making sure that as many of the writers in the writer's room were also potential performers, because I felt it was very important, because it was such a high wire act, because it was so detailed and crazy and ever changing and evolving. I wanted as many people who were there from the start, who were in on all the conversations, who knew the spirit of what we were trying to do, so that we could pivot, which we had to do millions of times every single day. So many, I would say, like most of, with the exception of like 2 of the writers in the room, every writer wound up being a performer on the show. Another huge thing was the legal stuff. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I want law and order, that's it. So finding these incredible writer actors who also had legal experience was a huge thing. So we got so lucky in finding all these incredible people. It was the best case scenario was we would get away with making it happen and getting through the 3.5 weeks. And worst case scenario was like, I guess it will be a show about us trying to do this and failing and figuring out a way to edit that into something that's interesting. But there really was there's no fallback. And that was terrifying, but exciting, like I said, in a way that is not normal for TV or for anything.
You really don't want in the back of your mind the safety plan to be, we're making the documentary Lost in La Mancha. I don't know if anyone's watched that, but it's like, that's not like a comforting thought as like your backup. Like, well, there'll be like videos of us like in the control room or in the prep, just like shouting at each other and being like, how could you not think about this, you freaking idiot? And then someone's crying, and then like someone from the network has to come in and they're like, get the camera out of here, we need to have that was a very scary backup plan. And I will say there is a worse outcome as well, which is, what if Ronald had a terrible time?
Yeah.
What if we got through it and he was just miserable and felt mad, and then when the reveal happens, he's like, so I'm the center of a joke to all of you, and my time and my agency is less than? That truly would have been awful. And that, I think, for all of us was probably our biggest concern going into this, was making sure that whoever our hero was would end up coming out of it feeling good about themselves and about the experience. And because there are ethical considerations to doing this stuff. You can't just pluck a real person, stick them into your like wacky gag machine, and whatever happens to them happens to them. There are like, this stuff will stay with them for the rest of their lives. So there's a ethical duty of care there to this person, and if you don't treat that very seriously, then it can go wrong. And then ultimately we're just doing jokes, right? We're just doing this for our entertainment, and this is all silly nonsense, make-believe stuff anyway. So the idea of making someone miserable whilst you're making this silly stuff doesn't seem to match with me. So I'm very happy again that Ronald is well, that he's happy, and that he enjoyed the experience.
And he had a great time. He really did. And we made sure of that. And truly, like the character Barbara says in the finale, everyone really did just they fell in love with Ronald. He's amazing. He's an incredible guy. We could not have been luckier, and props to Alexis Sampietro for finding him, because he's he really did restore my faith in humanity. I will say, he really did. Coming out of COVID, the world is so polarized. Everything is so messed up right now. Ronald Gladden made me realize, like, oh, there's still good people out there. There's people who care. And even the small little kindnesses of like taking responsibility for a clogged toilet that you didn't clog. Like, sounds silly, but that's like a small kindness that means a lot. And I think that's the absurdity of that, but also the kindness of it is kind of the sweet spot of what I was hoping to get with the show.
I mean, there's so much that you've talked about just in that answer alone that I could touch upon. But one of the things was, well, first let me say, I guess the best case scenario is what you hit, because walking away, I was worried. My wife and I were watching it together, and she's like, I feel bad for him. I was like, I mean, I think he's fine. And then when it all ends, you see him and he's happy. And I've seen interviews with him afterwards, and it's like, you know, you couldn't have nailed a better casting. Someone who could handle the joke, but also just a good person. And like you're saying, you know, restored faith in humanity. I was going to say he's 1 in a million. Hopefully that's not the case, and the numbers are, the ratios are a little bit closer, because we need more good people and more people who are willing to plunge toilets and take the hit when he doesn't need to, and everything else that he did on screen. You know, he's a real gem. So how close did this come to imploding? You know, and not just on screen, but also, like, this is a lot of stress on you. It's a lot of stress on your team, your cast, your crew. You know, how did you keep it going? You know, not only, like I said, what we saw on screen, but behind the scenes.
I honestly, I never really, once we got going on this thing, once the machine started moving, then I kind of never really felt, I don't think we ever came close to imploding particularly. I feared every night as I went to bed that something was going to happen and it would all collapse. But that's just, you know, that's your emotion speaking, and you're in the middle of Truman showing a person, and you're very aware that even when he goes home to sleep at night, he's still in a fake place. And that maybe you didn't think something through in that fake place, and like something you couldn't possibly have foreseen, like, I don't know, the availability of toothpaste or something to him would be like, wait, that's weird that I've been able to, and then it all collapses again. So every night there's always some fear that you'd wake up with some news from one of the field producers being like, yeah, Ronald left. I'm really sorry. You don't have a TV show anymore. But truthfully, if you actually look at, you know, as we look back on the experience, I don't really feel like we ever came that close to imploding. Of course, there are things that make you very nervous. He would say a couple of times as he was witnessing and experiencing things that this feels like a reality show. But I think that was just his way of sort of like vocalizing and articulating something that was strange going on. But I don't think we ever actually came all that close to cracking and breaking down. And again, I think that's testament to everyone really doing some incredibly robust work and treating this thing very, very seriously.
And just also, I'll add that, you know, we were constantly open to, it was a completely fluid, evolving experience. Everything at the end of every day, you know, we spent 10 weeks in the writer's room making these scripts, but kind of we had a lot of things that did wind up making it onto the screen, but a lot of things, everything had to change every night at the end of every day. Me, Nick, Andrew Weinberg, and Jake Szymanski, the director, we would all sit down and figure out, okay, what has been accomplished today of what was supposed to be done of the day's work, what hasn't been, what stuff that we think, for example, chair pants. That was something that, you know, the chair pants bit with Todd, that was intended to go on much further. So there was a janitor actor waiting on call with tools to remove the seat from the jury box so that Todd could sit in his chair pants all day, clearly uncomfortable. Then the next day he was going to be like, okay, I realized I made a mistake, and then show up in a new and improved pair of chair pants. So that was the kind of thing where, you know, we had to, in the moment, realize, okay, Ronald is getting suspicious. This is getting too silly. We got to reel it in. We got to rein it in. So we would adjust for the next day's work. And that was just part of the process. And that was really fun and exciting, because that's not normal for any TV show to be able to just in the moment be like, okay, we gotta figure out what was accomplished today, what wasn't, what do we need, what don't we need, how do we make the next days work the most efficient and get the comedy and the heart and everything we need out of it while not raising Ronald's suspicions to something else being up here.
Were there any jokes or ideas that you had that just in the end felt like they went too far or were too difficult to pull off that you had to?
The show was meant to start with Ronald arriving at the parking lot of the courthouse and walking past all these parked cars as he went to the register, went to check in at the courthouse. And while he's walking, what was meant to happen is a harried mother was pulling a stroller out of her car, and she's clearly having a hard time. And in the action of pulling the stroller out of her car, she ends up breaking a window of the car next to her, smashing it to pieces. And it was meant to be timed such that Ronald would see this action and she would go, oh, I'm going to leave a note. Don't worry about it. You head back inside. Don't worry. It's completely fine. And it was meant to be a sort of the first ethical test of Ronald, because we still actually have traces of this in the first episode when the judge, Alan, has his hand cut. It's his car that got smashed by the harried mother. But we ended up losing the actual window smash element of it, but keeping that storyline in the show. And the idea being that as the judge is talking about it, Ronald would have know what he's talking about and know that the judge isn't aware of what truly happened, and he is sitting on this very pertinent information that this very powerful man is not aware of right now. And we kind of thought about it. We did a little test of it. It had to be done with like a small sort of explosive trigger, essentially, to actually break the glass. It was loud as hell. And it was like terrifying, essentially, for someone to come and hear this, like feels like a gunshot, and then they're meant to then sit on this very important information that may or may not be a legal responsibility to divulge to a judge in a courthouse. Who knows? So we ended up ditching that because it was just way too much stress for the first 30 seconds of this person's experience with us. And I think it was the right call. We just needed to settle into that first day, to be honest.
And the other thing I'll add is there were a lot of things that did exist within Ronald's reality that didn't make it to the screen. So for example, the character of Todd, during voir dire, it comes out that he has been convicted of he's a ex-felon and a felon. His rights have been restored. He's allowed to now, participate in jury duty, but he's committed a crime. And that was, Ronald believed that throughout the whole season. And that was something that we just didn't include in the final cuts purely because there was too much story and there was so much amazing Todd stuff that it was just like, there wasn't time for it, essentially. But there were many things that existed within Ronald's reality that didn't make it on screen. Another example is, it kind of makes it on screen a little bit, but the idea that the courthouse is closing down, that was our way of explaining why there's only one court case happening, why we only have a few extras milling about. You kind of see it in the judge explaining that this is his final court case and he's retiring, but we did have a storyline about the whole the courthouse is shutting down, and that was to help explain the why things were the way they were. But there were a lot of things that existed within Ronald's reality that just didn't make it to the final edit.
Are there any plans for like a pop-up video type, dating myself, but pop-up video type version of the show, or an extended, like maybe another episode or two that kind of dives into some of that fun stuff?
Well, there's an audio commentary, I believe, if you watch it on your Amazon or your Freevee app, whichever it is, you can go and you can listen to some of our cast and also our fabulous director EP, Jake Szymanski, and they talk through, they do an old-fashioned DVD commentary track, essentially, for all 8 episodes, and it was a lot of fun watching those guys record it, and they gave some great color, add some great color to the experience, and especially from the actors as well, because they were in this thing, and obviously one wrong move and they would have blown the whole thing up. So yeah, if you want any more additional tidbits or color on the whole experience, that's probably the closest thing to it, which is the audio commentary tracks that you can find now.
And
That's
many
perfect.
of those actors were literally for those whole 3.5 weeks living with him in that hotel. So it was a fully immersive experience for them.
And diving into the actors a little bit, James Marsden is a perfect fit. You know, Ronald's fantastic, but how did you choose James? And you know, what was his initial reaction to the whole project?
Well, James is good friends with Dave Bernard, one of our producers, and there was always the idea that there would be some sort of celebrity for a couple of reasons. One is it's just fun to have a celebrity playing a kind of Hollywood version of themselves. Two, frankly, it does help the sort of project if you can put like a named person in this very novel and unproven kind of format. And then three, it helps as an additional steer for our hero. If he's presented with a turn left or turn right and we want him to turn left, if you're a regular person and a celebrity pops up behind you and says, I don't know, left feels pretty good right now, what do you think? Normal people tend to be like, oh, that's a person of influence, I guess I should turn left. So we always knew there was going to be a celebrity, and Dave had this fantastic relationship with James. They've worked together multiple times, and they had a conversation over dinner, and James really dug it. I think it's because he likes to push himself and do fun, interesting, and different things. And he wasn't like an improv kid coming up. That wasn't the world that he came out of. And so he wanted a chance to really test those chops in these insane waters and just throw himself into it. And my God, did he do that?
And I mean, just to have someone who not only, I mean, yes, his improv it blew me away. I was so impressed, but also being so willing to make fun of himself, and then also being willing to participate in this thing where, you know, for hours at a time, there would be absolutely nothing going on except boring court stuff that he would just be sitting there. So to get a bona fide movie star who is down to do that I was very impressed, and he really did such a fantastic job. And I will say, all of the cast, including Marsden, everyone was so invested in making sure that Ronald was having a good time, that Ronald was okay. No one wanted to make fun of Ronald. No one wanted this to be a bad experience for him. And that extended very much so to the actors. And Marsden was just we were always talking about the North Star of making sure that this is in no way a bad experience or making fun of Ronald.
That's great. And what was your favorite moment on camera, and your favorite, this is for each of you, favorite moment on camera and favorite moment behind the scenes that you can share?
Cody, you start.
I guess I'd have to say favorite moment on camera was the soaking. Favorite moment off camera, I guess I would have to say when Todd, this is something that didn't make it on the show, but when Todd is talking to the judge about his previous crime and finding out that he's a felon.
My favorite moment on camera, I think, was the arm wrestling at Margaritaville, because that was an insane production day. The logistics, the choreography, the effort from everyone, from all the cast and all the crew. That was a hard day for the cast. They were on camera for something like 11, 12 hours without break. They were on a hot bus that we deliberately sent on detours every moment that we could to be able to allow us to hop our crew from one spot to another. So they were on that bus for like 3.5 hours. It was a brutally difficult day to pull off, and to have that very final moment at Margaritaville, and we didn't know if Ronald was going to say yes, obviously. And to have him acquiesce and go like begrudgingly, okay, I'll arm wrestle James. And then obviously it's a great fun arm wrestle. James sells it brilliantly. And it was a real feeling of, truthfully, there is a sense as you watch that Margaritaville of like them really having a good time, because they were really having a good time. The actors themselves were actually allowed, the first time they were allowed to be like, hang out all as a group, and enjoy this meal together, whilst at the same time still performing incredibly and delivering these storylines. And so for it to actually the episode to cap off perfectly with the arm wrestle, that felt so satisfying and brilliant. And honestly, the off-camera moment was after we revealed the truth to Ronald, and after he'd sort of processed everything and taken it all on. That final day of shooting, we had ice cream trucks and pizza trucks and everything come in, and it felt like kind of the last day of semester. And everyone was just, now that we could all reveal ourselves and all the crew could come out of their hiding spots, everyone was just gathered around, taking photos with Ronald, telling them how much they love this guy, and he has no idea who they are. And you could see him in the center of attention, and the love that everyone truly had for this guy. That was really, really, that was a special day. I'll never forget that. It was wonderful.
That's fantastic.
I'm going to change my answer to that.
Oh, go ahead.
No, seriously, that day, now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, we were all, I mean, you see it a little bit in the finale, but like we were all hugging each other and crying. It was so emotional because it really was, we had done this thing and it wound up working, and not only did it work, but Ronald was happy about it, and it was probably the most special thing that's ever happened in my life. I've had a boring life though, so.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to actually go back and watch the commentary version, because every time I hear a story, there's something more. There's so many different layers to what was going on, and what you see is only like a fraction of it. So congratulations on pulling it off, and congratulations on your nomination. So
thank you so much, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
Cheers.